Welcome to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech into one place. I'm Dave Rome, I'm your host for this week's episode, and joining me once again, Brad Copeland, Mechanic to the Stars. How are you?
It's good to be back, Dave. I'm enjoying the Olympics. I'm enjoying all the excitement, fanfare. It's a good time for cycling enthusiasts. There's a lot to watch in a short amount of time.
There is. It's sort of it's been a very solid block straight off the tour and straight into the Olympics, and then soon into Tour de Femmes, and it's quite non-stop at the moment for anyone keen in cycling racing. So it's a good time. So yeah, I mean the Olympics are definitely on our mind. I think that's certainly something we're going to get to in a moment, but also some big news from the gravel side of things coming. Well, it's not yet released at the time of us recording this, but it will be by the time you're hearing this, which is SRAM have released their new Red XPLR Explore group, which was seen and teased at Unbound recently, and it's now official, along with some extremely wide Zipp wheels. So we'll get to that, but first, Brad, let's chat about some of these Olympic tech things. So we've had the road time trial, we've had the XCO, the cross-country Olympic discipline. Let's talk a bit about the road TT. I mean, there weren't any massively obvious tech updates or changes that we hadn't, I guess, seen previously at the tour, stuff that Ronan had walked us through on Escape Collective. But Wout had a double disc. What's going on here, man?
That was the coolest thing I've ever seen, without doubt. Wout van Aert used the front disc wheel, which I actually did a little bit of research because I personally had never seen one. I'm a big fan of TT bikes and the nuances and the tech and the oddity. And in my life of watching pro cycling, could never recall there were some old images before my life of like the Miguel Indurain era where they were using some kind of funny old time trial bikes with small front wheels and occasionally a front disc. But in the modern era of 700C front and rear wheels, I have not seen... And on the road. Not on the track. I've never seen a front TT disc, full disc wheel used, and I can't say that anymore. So he managed a third place, so it was certainly not ineffective. I think we could spout a long list of why that is a sketchy choice to make. Crosswinds, technical course, a lot of bumps, rough surfaces with cobblestones, a lot of stopping and starting with breaking through tight corners in a city street and the time trial on the wet roads. It seems like it would be, questionable, and I think even the announcers were questioning it, but hard to argue with an Olympic medal at the end of the day. So congrats to him, and also awesome choice. It was the coolest bike I've seen in a while.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, certainly coming from a cyclocross background, Wout is a known good bike handler, or a known amazing bike handler, and I guess it takes a lot of confidence to pick that setup, but I mean, he has been quoted as saying he tested it, and it wasn't the first time he had tested it, and that was the decision on the day based on a low level of wind. So yeah, perhaps you'd argue it didn't work out quite as well as he'd wished, but can't be too upset with a medal at that. So I mean, we also saw quite a lot of crashes in the rain and all that, which we unfortunately don't have answers to. I mean, they were said, we heard that being a street course, there were various holes and indentations in the road is something that I heard, and then the rain, but beyond wild speculation, I mean, there's probably not much more to add to that.
No, but, I would say, I mean, between manhole covers, white lines painted on the roads for, crosswalks and everything, some cobbled sections, it definitely invited a lot of potential for hazards, even if the conditions weren't extremely wet necessarily. And so, I mean, the women's race was even, I think, wetter than the men's slightly, and it was just, ice skating out there. So it was definitely a sketchy time where, who knows on a dry day if the results would have changed significantly or not. But at the end of the day, the tech can get you so far, and then the bike handling skills have to come in at some point. And I think those who have experience in the wet and know what they're doing probably fared a little bit better due to the technical nature of the course, given the conditions. Yeah,
for sure. One of the things you noted to me was that after crashing, a lot of the riders, obviously trying to jump back on as quickly as possible, and their aero shoe covers were costing them watts.
Yeah, it's the little things that sometimes are overlooked. I think in the time trial too, everything is kind of set up for a best case scenario, but when it goes wrong, it's hard to sometimes salvage with the bike change when you have to swap, whether it's bottles or Garmin that's scattered across the road or whatever, and a quick bike change off the roof where seconds count, and things can get a little bit kind of haywire in the moment when a lot of things are happening, and it's a bit of a chaotic scene. So once you have multiple crashes in the time trial, obviously a day is probably done, but certainly some seconds were left on the table too for at least a few athletes I saw struggling to clip at least one foot in after they were trying to remount on their bikes, getting going again. And it's those little things where, maybe you didn't think about it, but maybe you will forever now once it's happened to you. When I know it certainly happened to me when I was used to train in the wintertime in colder environments where I've certainly had to use shoe covers before. And so I was, once it was brought to the attention of the viewers that there was some shoe cover interference, or if you were watching closely, you could see it yourself. It was a familiar thing that I never really would have given much thought to either. But I also saw some shoe covers in use in the cross country mountain bike race as well. So it's certainly something that it's a marginal gain, but presumably worth it given the use across disciplines now, even in disciplines you might not expect.
Yeah, so I mean, the Olympics, like, Wout's double disc doesn't really help the average consumer, but seeing the top athletes at the Olympics not able to clip into their pedals probably is a good reminder to check the fit of your shoe covers around your cleat interface, and take out some scissors if needed. So everything at the Olympics is for one day use only. So if you need to cut a hole in your shoe cover a little bit bigger, I think that's acceptable for an Olympic event. Otherwise, just deal with it. All right. Well, you mentioned the XCO there. I mean, we had a domination of Pinarello wins. Had Pauline Ferrand-Vraud in the women's win it for France. That was awesome to see. And then Tom Pidcock took it in the men's. I won't get into the actual racing because this is a tech podcast. Brad, I know you have some strong thoughts that go against a piece on Escape Collective about how the men's race played out. But I am keen to talk about the tech. Yeah, well, so our keen and longtime listeners will remember our discussion of podium, the P1 wheels that were used both by Pauline and Tom in their successes. We predicted this result maybe months ago. It's sort of a result that, had it not happened, would have been a bigger story in a certain way than had it gone exactly the way that it did for at least the 2 gold medals that were awarded. I would say, interestingly, despite it being a great weekend for Pinarello, we can appreciate that Pauline and Tom did not both use the same bike model. Pauline raced her hardtail, whereas Tom obviously was seen on the full suspension bike. And rumor had it the frame was beefed up from the earlier version of the same frame for enhanced BB stiffness or frame stiffness in general. I heard that. I did not confirm that that's true, but that was reported. And so we can wait for a corrections corner moment in future episodes if that in fact was not the case. But no, I think that's correct. I mean, to give a shout out to a previous place of employment, but the Pink Bike podcast actually had an interview. It was a sponsored content, but they had an interview with the Pinarello engineers on that bike, and it was basically sounds like it was custom made for Tom and Pauline, and specifically to their requirements. And one of the requirements that Tom had in his ability through Ineos, he won the last Olympics on an unbranded BMC 4-stroke, and that came about through basically testing like 6 different cross-country bikes. Like Ineos basically just said, Pinarello, our sponsor, doesn't have a bike, let's go find the best one. And he spent a few days, and they found the bike that he liked the best. And a large part of that, I think, was like a bike that was just stiff under power, which is quite surprising. It's not a feature I would necessarily prioritize, but I'm not Tom Pidcock, but I guess I found it surprising just because he's not a massive rider. So I mean, yes, he puts down puts down huge watts for someone of his size, but it's still not, it's not like an Andre Greipel or not the old day like massive sprinter kind of level of watts. So, but yeah, anyway, that's confirmed. I think that's what you're saying there. Yeah, stiff. And maybe he spends a lot more time out of the saddle than the average rider, certainly than you or I would probably be capable of, especially given the duration of the race. It was kind of a longer race. The races are sort of constrained and to a certain time projection, and this was kind of at the long end for both the men and the women in that respect. And he's full gas the whole time, and then some. Obviously, he suffered a front puncture
relatively uncommon, a front puncture. My speculation is, and Tom himself was sort of publicly critical of the course that the Olympics raced on there at Elancourt Hill and outside of Paris. And it was kind of a new course built on a landfill.
Entirely man-made.
Yeah, very man-made, and a lot of gravel over hardpack, which, is just a loose and very unpredictable surface. And so, one of the ways to account for loose surface, whether it's like a sandy, dry surface or gravel, is to lower your tire pressure and run wider tires, which everyone was apparently doing. Somewhere in the 2.5
they're all on,
from Specialized.
2.4 to 2.5, yeah.
Yes, so I imagine there was some low pressures involved, perhaps even just burping a tire is possible at those low pressures. The way he was coming through kind of a bermy, twisty section that was relatively not technical, but I'm sure he was hitting them
forces through
very hard. Yeah, so possibly just burped it. He kind of rode it in minus one big drop that he hopped down on his feet before he got to the tech zone and took a wheel change that seemed to catch his mechanics off guard as well, who were not exactly standing there ready and waiting for him. But it must have just occurred without time to really relay anything to the tech zone, which is, usually there's staff or team members or friends and family around the course who can relay this information to the mechanics. And that did not happen. So he did take a long wheel change and didn't hold him back too much.
I blinked and then all of a sudden saw him in the tech zone, and it kind of looked like he'd ridden past his mechanics in a way. Like I was almost wondering if he was riding. He's like, oh, my front's getting a bit flat. I wonder if I can do another lap on it. And then it was like, oh, maybe not. And he kind of turned back to get it fixed.
Yeah.
It was kind of it seemed very last second in many ways. It wasn't like he was rolling through the tech zone pointing at his wheel.
Right. Yeah, and he had just been in front and kind of off the front with Victor in the sort of first attack of the race. There were half a dozen that occurred again between the two of them, but Victor only managed to pass him when Tom dismounted to hop down a drop off on the track rather than to ride it because of the sketchy front wheel situation. So it must have really just been 10 seconds prior to entering the tech zone. He really made it first known to anyone that there was a problem in the first place. So in spite of all that, took a front wheel. I think he lost 38 seconds combined between riding slowly on the damaged wheel and then getting the wheel change, and managed to claw it all back and then some. So it was an unbelievable performance. Again, I think the result was what we expected, but the way he did it, I mean, he's an unbelievable talent, and he showed that he was, without question, the dominant rider that day.
Yeah, certainly to come back from all that. But Brad, there's certainly going to be a few listeners that aren't really familiar with cross-country racing, and I guess with the rule around the tech zone. So can you explain, I guess, mountain biking prior used to be fully self-supported in racing, go back quite a few years, and if you got a flat tire, you'd be fixing it yourself. But a number of years ago, they changed that, and there's now tech zones. Can you just give us a brief rundown of what is allowed, what isn't allowed?
Sure. Yeah. Tech zones are there's usually two opportunities to stop in a tech/feed zone on the course. Sometimes the course goes on opposite sides of a single tech zone where it passes two times in one lap, so you have two opportunities. Other times there's two different locations around the course. And so, you can basically have everything except for a spare bike. You can swap literally anything as long as you keep the same frame you started with. Basically, I can't imagine swapping a fork out in the race, but I've never seen that particular requirement come up in my experience. But so
I've seen Jared Graves at the Australian Nationals blow a fork and just ride the next 4 laps with a completely blown fork, no air in it.
He probably
still win.
Yeah. That dude is, I had spent some time with Jared Graves on the EWS side of life, and he's wild. But so I've seen that, but I've never seen somebody obviously stop and replace that. But I've seen most everything else. And in World Cup racing, and probably at the Olympics too, this time around, actually put a sticker on the frame, and you have to use it even in the short track race and the cross country race. You have to use the same bike. And if you have a accident where the bike is broken in between the short track race and you need to replace it, you have to petition or kind of submit to the UCI for approval of the new one, that, you're not pulling a scheme to try to get some kind of an advantage.
Before we move on from this, I guess I'm keen just to talk about the winning bikes, which is, so those Pinarellos, I guess what stood out to me is just how similar Tom's bike was to what he last used in terms of specification. So he's won, he's now 2-time Olympic champion back to back, which is no small feat. But his bike setup hasn't really changed beyond that frame and also those new wheels, which from I guess, Princeton's offshoot mountain bike company, and they're using Bird spokes as well. So it's very, very lightweight wheel, probably quite compliant. But he's still on Shimano XTR mechanical, because they don't have Di2, which I thought was interesting. I mean, like, that's the exact same group set he raced at the last Olympics, to show you the age of that group. And also SR Sun Tour, which is not the most popular suspension brand in mountain biking. SR Sun Tour suspension, again, he was on this at the last Olympics, with electronic lockouts, which is, I mean, he certainly seems to use that to his advantage. We're talking about that stiffness in the frame. It seems like he's forever locking out that suspension for a stiff platform to pedal against. So, I just thought it was interesting that we're, I know the last Olympics was a bit late, so we're talking about 3 years versus 4 years, but it's, you don't normally see a bike like that change so little.
Yeah, it's I would say Shimano is long overdue for an update. You're right. It has been actually more than 4 years of competing on what is ostensibly the exact same group, which it's a good group. It performs well, but it's pretty shocking and kind of a long period of time for a manufacturer to go without releasing an update. Certainly SRAM has been through about 3 versions now since XCR in the current iteration came out. So I mean, it came out around the same time as the original Mechanical Eagle group, which obviously went to AXS and now has gone to the transmission type. It's kind of second gen AXS group, and that has all happened while Shimano's current XTR has been in use. So I would expect that to change soon, but I've been saying that and it hasn't. So
the latest rumor I've heard is early 2025.
Okay, yeah, I keep pushing it back like at 6-month intervals or so. It's like, okay, all right, sure, whatever. I'm sure it'll be great. I look forward to seeing it. Shimano doesn't usually release something that is not a significant improvement or doesn't address major quirks or complaints that exist. So surely it will be something pioneering and innovative, and I cannot wait to see what it is. But you're right. It's quite curious that Tom has, he was using the Synchro Silverton SL wheel, which we were also using at Scott at the time, which is like a full one-piece carbon wheel, another very stiff, very light product choice. But same Continental tires. Maybe there's a width increase, or maybe it just appears to be because the rims are wider on those Princeton P1 wheels. But fundamentally the same. And I guess like you said, I think he and Pauline ride about the same size frame, which might be easier for Pinarello to then develop these products for them specifically. And then iterate on those kind of designs as needed to suit the riders, where it doesn't require a ton of retooling, I presume. But I would say they got their money's worth out of this investment in the mountain bike side. 2 for 2. A pretty good year for Pinarello on the mountain bike side, which is not anything
100% success rate for the mountain bike athletes they sponsor.
So let's see what happens.
I think it's just the 2 of them, isn't it?
It's just the 2 of them. Pauline has announced her retirement from mountain biking already. So it's going to be only Tom, I guess, occasionally racing mountain bikes next year. And Pauline is scheduled to announce by mid-August her road program for the future, where she hopes to win the Tour de France before retiring officially from cycling. So when Pauline puts her mind to something, she tends to succeed. So let's wish her all the
world
best.
World champ in every discipline. So
going out on top, and see what else we can win before hanging it up officially.
For sure. Yeah. So I guess, like, just before I move on from this, is that there is an interesting trend there where you said the last Olympics, Tom Pidcock ran those full carbon one-piece Syncross wheels, which are stiff, and stiffness was almost a design priority. Whereas by contrast, I mean, Bird spokes almost goes the other way. It's all about compliance and give. And yes, it's very light, but it's also, I mean, there's a large amount of flex in a wheel built by Bird spokes. So it's an interesting trend. I think I'm just mentioning it so people are aware that in mountain bike and in off-road disciplines, there is a very obvious trend towards wheels that are less stiff.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And another notable name who was conspicuously absent, I would say, from the front of the race in Paris was Nino Schurter, the legend himself, who is a Scott SRAM. Not his day. He is a Scott SRAM team member, team leader for sure. And he tends to opt for the traditional spoked version of Syncross's wheel offerings, as opposed to the Silverton SL, which is that full one-piece carbon, very stiff, very light one. It's about 100 to 120 gram weight difference penalty for the wheels that he opts for most of the time, simply because of the flex, the give, the compliance of the spoked version of the wheel versus the SL, which is very stiff, very rigid, not very compliant. And in testing that we did, we were basically seeing basically just doing like a blind feel based testing comparing the two wheel sets, and the riders were just sort of setting their own pressure on feeling in the tires, and we're running basically a 1 psi lower in the Silverton SLs just to get it to feel kind of appropriate. And then kind of it was in a questionable pressure for reliability purposes, resisting punctures or pinch flatting it from impact. So for that reason, riders I would say don't always opt for the stiffest and lightest thing on the mountain bike, because there's a little more to it than that. And sometimes those rolling resistance or control and grip are a little more valuable than stiffness and weight on the mountain bike.
I think, and you say, you're saying mountain bike, but I also think that wholly applies to gravel. I think there's, in the right sort of conditions, there's probably an argument to be made for that application on road as well, where you can have a wheel that's too stiff. If it's a technical course, or if it's, the downhill's a pivotal point, a wheel that's too stiff will bounce off of track, bounce off of line, and make you nervous and have you brake in areas and perhaps not hold speed in the same way. So
maybe that front disc, disc on Wout van Aert's bike was unique to the day, because I feel like that wheel checked all the boxes that you said were negatives just now, except going real fast in a straight line.
Well, speaking of lower pressures, that brings us to SRAM. At the time you're listening, we would have just published 1.5 million words. It's almost that. It's a lot of words. I have write-ups on the new SRAM Red XPLR AXS and write-ups on the matching wheels and components from Zipp. It goes really in depth because there's actually a lot of new concepts introduced with these group sets. I might just do a little bit of a quick run through of what AXS Explore entails, and then Brad, you can just quiz me, because it's all I've thought about for the last 3 weeks straight.
Okay.
So, because I've been writing this stuff. So, big fundamentals is that it's one new Red XPLR AXS, not to be confused with Red AXS, which is the road version. So, XPLR AXS is more aimed at the gravel rider, but it can be fit to a road bike. It introduces SRAM's full mount derailleur, which takes the place of a universal derailleur hanger. So this is something we've seen in the mountain bike space with transmission, where the derailleur, there's no longer a derailleur hanger. The derailleur bolts directly, basically in line to the axle. This new stuff, it's 1x only. It's the first time SRAM has gone to 13 speed. You're locked into one single cassette size, which is 10 to 46 tooth. There's a power meter which doesn't integrate the chainrings into the power meter. The chainring is now threads onto the power meter, which is great to see. Another feature taken from the mountain bikes. And the shifters, brakes, crank arms, and 12-speed chain are all shared with Red AXS road stuff. What'd I miss?
So it's the same 12-speed chain for this 13-speed group that's used.
Correct.
Yes. So maybe we have to rename that.
What? The 12-13?
Yeah. How could it be only a 12-speed chain if it's a 13-speed chain? We got to write.
It's true. The packaging says I've seen the new packaging. It says 12/13.
Okay, good.
Red
right.
AXS.
Thank God.
So same chain, and they've basically managed to not have to go to a narrower chain, because that SRAM full mount design, by getting rid of the derailleur, has basically given them more space to move the cassette outward. The little 10 tooth now sits, roughly in a pocket where the derailleur hanger used to sit. So that's how it's made possible. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot more details available, and I've got full details plus deep riding impressions on Escape if you want to know more. But Brad, anything with this group that you wanna chat about?
Yeah, well, we have been very instrumental in the industry adopting the universal derailleur hanger on gravel and all-road bikes on this podcast. Dave, you and I are pioneers in this space, and SRAM listened.
Puppets.
That's the story I'm going to stick with. Okay. We kind of all saw this coming. Keegan Swenson was among those who we saw very prominently using this group in plain sight at the largest gravel event in the world earlier in the springtime. So we knew it was coming. More or less what it was going to be like. And it's pretty much it's like purely derivative of the transmission group from the mountain bike side. The cassette is identical, but a little bit smaller. Obviously has 13 cogs crammed in there, but it looks aesthetically the same. And it looks aesthetically similar, I would say, to a hybrid between the road and the mountain bike groups. Now, Dave.
There's one very, very important difference, which I haven't mentioned, which is the cassettes look identical, but SRAM transmission on the mountain bike actually has a narrow, wide tooth profile on the cassette. And the whole idea with transmission is to basically stop e-bikers from breaking cassette teeth and breaking chains. So SRAM transmission actually works, the derailleur's mapped to the cassette, and the cassette guides the chain from one tooth to the next. And basically it stops the user from shifting more than one gear at a time. So the derailleur will only ever move to, like, you know, if you ask for 2 shifts, the derailleur only ever initiate the second shift after the first shift is fully complete. So the chain is only ever across, like, you know, going across one cog to the next at any one point. So you can't force it to get too diagonal. The downside of that is that your shift speed, you know, if you're wanting to shift through 3 or 4 multiple gears at a time, it's quite slow. The positive is that it absolutely is the best shifting system under full power. Like, you can ride the most watts you can put through, and you can shift, and it'll initiate that shift without issue. SRAM Red XPLR actually does away with that narrow wide profiling on the cassette, and it does away with that digital mapping of the derailleur to that cassette. It basically just mimics the road stuff in terms of shift speed. So you can now freely shift however many gears you want.
Yeah, and I would say
break your chain
on the road side. That's probably welcomed. That was the big gripe when the transmission group came out. I think when people just hopped on it for the very first time was that it does feel slow. What it never feels like is that you're not engaged in one gear or another gear when you're shifting. It's always you can solid. Pedal at full power. It's a crazy sensation to get used to. It does require some getting used to, actually. But it's almost like it's like constant engagement. It's like it's a kind of a funny sensation when you first experience it. So, but it's slow, and I think when you have tight ratios, you're shifting a lot more on road bikes. Typically, it might not invite having such a slow shift. That's a relief to hear. I have not yet obviously used this, Dave, so I'm eager to hear your actual riding impressions of it. But it's a good-looking group. I imagine it's going to be comparable in performance to the new SRAM Red group, which has been, in my opinion, very, very good. And so I'm very excited about it. But what is also cool, I think, is that they are introducing a host of products, a suite even of products that are also Explore, what would you call it, model or Explore series products, including some cockpit parts and some pretty interesting wheels and tires.
Yeah, all from the Zipp line of things. Yeah, I mean, before we get to that, I guess it's probably worth noting that I think the Explore branding is wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, this Red AXS stuff is very racy, and I think that 10 to 46 tooth cassette, as I mentioned in my review quite a few times, is that it's a bit too limited in range for like actual Explore / adventure style gravel riding. For that, you would still pick like the mountain bike transmission and then match that with like the rest of the new group. The new road group, so you'd probably pick the new shifters and brakes and cranks, and then put a mountain bike derailleur and cassette on it in order to get a wider range. Yeah, this stuff's really racy, and I think, especially this new Zipp stuff, which we'll get to, is very racy. Not really the Explore kind of vibe. So
it sounds to me like this could maybe be more of an all-road group than a gravel group, Dave.
It could be an all-road group if you want it to be. In many ways, I would agree with that. I think the range available makes sense as an all-road group. The gear steps are very road-like. Like you've got, the cassette goes 10, 11, 12, 13 tooth at the lower end of the smaller end of the cassette. So, I think there's a lot of things that would make this the perfect group if you want one buy on your all-road bike. And that, I think that's a very good segue to these new Zipp wheels, the Zipp 303 Explore. So there's 2 versions, the SW and the S. The SW is the more premium version. It's got like Zipp's sort of signature texturing on the rim for, like that golf ball like texturing, the sawtooth like texturing. It's got a lighter weight layup in the rim. It's got a lighter weight hub. It's got slightly higher end bladed spoke from Sapine. And obviously it's more expensive as a result. That one comes in just under 1,500 grams. We'll call it basically 1,500 grams. And then the S wheel, heavier rim, simpler molding. You don't get all the shaping on the outside. More basic 3-pole hub. CX Sprint spokes from Sapine, and that one comes in at about 1630 grams. 1628, I think, is what my scales told me. So yeah, that's the set I've been using. The two wheels, they share the same rim dimensions, and that's where things get interesting. So the numbers are what I would say are crazy, is probably the best summary of that. We're talking about 40 mil external width, 54. 40.
Say that with emphasis. 40.
40.
That
40.
is huge.
Yeah, so 40 mil external width, 54 millimeter depth for a wheel designed to go off-road. And then where everyone will fall off their seats, 32 millimeters internal width, which is easily the widest gravel wheel I am aware of at this point in time. It gets better, Brad. Wait, there's more. Because that rim is so wide, and because Zipp are recommending a tire starting from 40 mil up to 45 if you want to aero optimize it, or you can go wider after that, that width of tire combined with that 32 mil width rim doesn't meet ISO standards. So Zipp are going against, and they're saying, we don't meet ISO standards with our rim and tire combination. Therefore, you need to stick with our approved list of tires. Which kind of feels like we're back to the beginning of hookless again.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like my early days when I got my first set of NSWs, and I couldn't find any tires because it was during the pandemic and no one had anything in stock anywhere. Yep. Yeah, great.
So no lessons have been learned.
Yes, and the tires that they offer or that they sort of promote most prominently, I would say, are their own branded, made by Goodyear.
Yeah.
Are you testing those too?
Yep. The Fitment series of tires. So it's made by Goodyear specifically for these rims. Goodyear State only use them on these rims. But yeah, it's basically Goodyear tires, slightly different tread pattern to what Goodyear themselves offer. But the casing and the tread cap is sort of reshaped to account for this extra width. And then they're meant to like measure exactly as quoted. So there's a 40 mil version with like a slick tread, and then there's a 45 millimeter width version with like a sort of an intermediate low profile off-road tread. And yeah, in theory, that 45 mil tire should measure exactly 45 mil on these rims. Mine measured 43.7, but yeah, the numbers.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good time to also mention that rim width does in fact have quite a significant bearing on how wide your tires actually sit, regardless of their labeled width. That's so when we talk about frames with accommodation for tires of 50 millimeters, that's all a little bit speculative because of the fact that your rim width, which could now be as wide as 32 millimeters, for sure. If you put like if I run a 28 on my 353 and SWs, they measure 30 because of the inner width of that rim is a 25 mil, which is pretty wide for a road rim. It's very wide for a road rim, internal width. And so it affects the actual width as opposed to the stated width of the tire as well. So it'd be interesting to see if you put a different tire on there, and maybe you can do this. Balloon out. Yeah, exactly how much it does balloon out. I'd be curious to know, because that's a width I've not encountered.
So there's a few things to know here. So I guess let me first cover the why Zipp's doing this, and then I'll get to some of my issues. And again, all of this is covered on Escape Collective. I've spent most of the last 3 weeks writing about these, this new group set and these wheels. So, if you are interested to know, then, I've got it all on Escape. So, but yeah, so the why. So Zipp basically wanted to remove the light bulb shape of running a wide gravel tire on a rim. They wanted to basically create an aero wheel that kept the airflow attached from the tire through to the rim and create, more smooth airflow and therefore reduce drag. They're not the first to have this idea. I think Hunt were probably the first to market. If not them, probably 3T. We've also seen, we recently spoke on this podcast about Parkour, for example, doing it. DT Swiss also now have an aero gravel wheel. So it's a thing. But Zipp's definitely takes the thing to an extreme. But yeah, so there's the aero factor, and then at the same time, what they've tried to do is Zipp in recent years, talking about those Firecrest wheels, those 25 mil width rims. Zipp believe that one of the biggest gains you can get isn't necessarily aero, but it's reducing vibrational losses in the system. So just letting your bike basically float over the surface, and therefore allowing you just to retain power and not lose momentum through what the surface is doing. And the best way to do that is to reduce tire pressure, just like in mountain bike. But then through reducing tire pressure, you end up introducing things like sidewall squirm and risk of flat tires and risk of pinch flats. So the idea is make the rim really wide. You can then have more volume, which allows you to reduce tire pressure. And then the ultra wide rim gives stability to the sidewall of the tire, stops it from squirming. They've also then given a really flat edge to those rim sidewalls. So in the case you do strike the rim, say against a rock or a pothole, there's a flat surface for the tire to sort of bump up against. So more technology, more concepts taken from mountain bike there. But yeah, that's the broad picture of the why. Problem is, you can't just add 7 millimeters of internal rim width and not have any negatives introduced into a system. And yeah, as my review gets into, I mean, we're talking about a system that seems to kind of just flatten off the tire and square it off a little bit to the point that you kind of end up rolling along like with the pressures they're recommending. Like I'm down to like 23 psi front, 24 psi rear on a 45 mil tire. Oh. At those pressures, you end up rolling with like the entire tread cap of the tire, like the full width of the tread basically on the ground. And that creates something known as rubber trail, which basically acts like increasing the trail of a bike. So your handling of the bike changes. You can get used to it, but on the road, it feels pretty weird. And then, yeah, there's also other elements that I get into, but it's fast. It feels great on buzzy, kind of like high speed, fast gravel, this type of stuff you'd drive a Toyota Camry on. But if it gets like chundery and it gets like rough, the system seems to run out of like capacity to handle those bumps.
Yeah, I would have been concerned just on the rim depth alone to be sort of unfriendly toward rougher surfaces. I mean, I've ridden some deeper section rims on like cross bikes and gravel bikes in the past, nothing this deep or this wide, but could certainly tell a difference in the sort of compliance or flexibility of the wheel. And this is not only deep, but also very wide. You imagine that structure is pretty resistant to compressing and deflecting. So yeah.
I would have assumed so too. I would have, because you're talking about 54 millimeter depth, which is pretty significant. My thumb pressed into the side of the rim. Don't do this to these wheels. They're incredibly thin through the center. Mm-hmm. It seems like Zipp have managed to tune in some level of compliance. I wouldn't say these are an incredibly rigid wheel in that regard. I think Zipp's actually done quite a good job as far as softening these wheels up in that sense. But yeah, I mean, certainly that depth is going to add some level of stiffness. The other surprising thing with that depth is I had assumed it would be blown around in the wind a lot, but I took it out, on a day where probably shouldn't have been out on a bike because trees were falling down, and they were incredibly stable, which shocked me. So I mean, kudos to them on that. Like that's a ringing endorsement in terms of crosswind stability.
I imagine they spend a good amount of time engineering exactly that. I would expect with Zipp's sort of pedigree, and I've always been a fan of Zipp products. I will say I have no affiliations with SRAM or Zipp anymore, but I continue to use Zipp stuff because I've been very pleased and impressed by how consistently they feel on the road bike is more where I use them. But I used to live on the coast in California where you get a lot of unpredictable crosswinds and different changing wind directions. And I found them to be very impressive and stable in those environments. So I'm curious to see these in real life and hopefully spend a little time on them because it's quite a deep wheel, especially once you add the height of the tire as well. That's several more centimeters probably of
91 depth as a combined 91 millimeter depth as a combined system is what I measured. Mm-hmm. So
so that's pretty deep.
It's very deep. So again, head to Escape. I spent all that time riding them, so if you care, check it out. But price wise, we did a few weeks ago, I complained that it seems like every episode we talk about $3,000 wheels. Good news, these aren't that. The top end, the SW, is $2,100 US, so still not cheap, but not the most expensive. And then the S wheel, which is the more affordable, the one that I tested, is $1,400 US. And that both of those include Zipp's warranty that if you smack it against a rock and you break a rim, they'll give you a new wheel. So a generous warranty.
I was going to say, especially with your warning not to push too much against the side of the rim. I know what you mean. I've experienced similar wheels where there's noticeable give in the sidewall, which I've never ridden one in a gravel scenario where I was smacking rocks against the side of it. But I was wondering,
it's worrying.
Yeah, is it worrying? Okay, it sounded worrying, but I wanted to get your honest thought.
Especially given the width of the rim. So the width of the rim is so wide that you're basically, the rim is in line to the tire sidewall. So whatever the tire sidewall scraping against, the rim is too. Truthfully, I have only done one ride on them where I didn't scratch the rim. And that was a ride that I specifically went out and sourced really fast gravel, the sort of stuff you could drive the car on, like a general, front wheel drive family car on. They excelled in that condition. But yeah, sort of get it into more rocky explore style gravel, and it's no longer the wheel I'd be picking. So yeah, it really is kind of like that all road / pure, like, champagne gravel race scenario where these wheels I think are gonna be the pick. And then for more extreme gravel races and just general riding, just general gravel riding, it's probably not on my wish list. But yeah, I think for people that want to run like a 40 to 45 mil tire and want to do it, high average speed ride, maybe a group ride that involves road and some champagne gravel, then this kind of wheel makes a lot of sense.
Were you riding these, I presume, on your Stigmata?
Yes.
Did you have any thoughts or woes about the clearance or anything between chainstay and rim or any of that type of stuff? You have plenty of room back there.
Yeah, so Stigmata is huge in terms of clearance. It can fit a 50. It's a very modern bike. These rims are certainly wide enough, though, that you need to truly assess whether your frame is up to handling these. Because, some frames might fit a 40 tire, but the chainstays kink in, past the tire point, and these rims might actually suffer some clearance issues. So, yeah, certainly when Hunt first went with their limitless wheels on the road, I think they went out to like 36 mil width. Was it that wide? 35 mil width. And again, like Roval have wheels that wide. There have been some known compatibility issues in the road space, and I think we'll probably see similar issues with these wheels in the gravel space. But any new bike that's sort of pushing 45s to 50 millimeter clearance, I'd assume that there's going to be few issues.
Yeah, I remember when the first Firecrest rims emerged, and suddenly quite a few road frames, you would get either extreme rub or, there's some compatibility fitment issues. So I just would maybe caution the user or the potential user to be aware of that. As
you just remind me of my favorite tidbit related to these wheels.
Oh, good.
The internal width is so wide, you can fit a 303 Firecrest current generation inside of it.
No way. Yeah, the external width of the Firecrest rim is narrower than the internal of the rim bed. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So that also is like mind blowing, because when I remember when the first Firecrest rims appeared, it was like seeing an Eagle cassette for the first time. We're just like, whoa, man, like this is
it's
comically
comical.
Large.
Yeah.
So okay, cool. Well, so I would say that's the only question that I had, or concern I had, beyond what your actual real world feedback was whether it would legitimately fit most frames, new frames only, probably not go back too far in history where you would encounter some clearance trouble. So this is probably for the forward thinking,
cutting edge,
UDH equipped frames only. Let's say only bikes have been made in the last 7 weeks since we've been doing our podcast.
Or the new Giant Revolt, which is brand new.
Yes.
But not UDH. Yes. So anyway, a lot to take in with these wheels. Do head to the website. I'm going to keep saying that because I feel like I spent a lot of my life writing this up, so please read it.
I think they're worth actually taking a look at, because they are so unique and different. So even if you're not in the market for some wheels, just take a look. They're pretty different, and it's a new trend. I expect other brands will follow.
It's a new trend. I think this trend will push road tires even wider than what we're used to seeing. I think the progression here. There's now a 7 millimeter gap between Zipp's road wheels / they were previously gravel wheels to these new ones, and I do think that we'll probably see road wheels in a weird way perhaps trend even wider over the next few years as a result of perhaps the adoption of these such wide rims and people realizing the benefit such a smooth ride can make to speed. So yeah, I'm not going to call this product groundbreaking, but I would say it if it proves successful, it will be trend setting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's been kind of as things get wide across all disciplines, road, mountain bike, and gravel, it kind of forces everybody to get on board or be left in the dust, it seems. From frame manufacturers, part manufacturers, wheel and tire manufacturers. It kind of has to work all together, or
for sure,
such innovations can't really take off. But I'm curious to read your write-up of this too, because I haven't read it yet either. And this is a pretty fascinating new product that kind of changes a lot of the known calculus, I would say, up to now.
It did my head in. Yeah. So anyway, on that note, let's move on. But yeah, a whole lot to take in there. Yeah, a lot of numbers covered there. So yeah, check it out. We've got all the write-ups. I'll stop saying that. Brad, let's do a PSA. Our PSA, public service announcement. You wanted to change the name to, what was your idea? Just, hey, you, do this.
Yeah, the call to action. That was what I wanted to change it to the call to action.
Okay.
So we could encourage.
That's smoother than what I just said.
Yeah, but if it's about tires, we were going to do the PSA.
That's it. Yeah.
But it's not. So it's not that this week.
It's not that.
It's a call to action.
It's a call to action. I've added this one. You can, Brad, feel free to disagree with me, but I'm just going to say thru-axles on modern road, mountain, gravel, every bike can be considered a wear item. And I think a lot of people see them as like a permanent fixture to the bike, but I'm here to say that most of them are aluminium and they do wear out. So
yeah, I would say the fact that they are aluminum or aluminium, as you would say, and the fact that generally speaking, the tools used to remove them are not and are steel and are harder, materially speaking, than the material used in the axle. Inevitably, the hex head does tend to deform slowly and as you wrench on it one way or the other. And I'm sure if you've had a thru-axle bike, you've experienced it, where they tend to bind up or get a little bit seasy, let's say, a little kind of almost galling type of an experience if they've maybe been exposed to moisture and left for a long time or not greased adequately. And they can be quite sticky or like, yeah, I mean, it's like they've seized though, not like it's a stickiness, it's like a difference there. But you have to really overcome that, much like a SRAM crank bolt with perhaps more torque than you applied in the first place to loosen it. And so, those hex heads, especially if it's a 5 mil head, which some of them are, but some are 6 mil heads.
Most are 6 now.
The
for
5
this reason.
mils really do seem to round out quickly. And I've definitely drilled out a number of thru-axles in my life, and that is a pain in the butt to do because it's such a large item to drill out, and there's a lot of consequential stuff near it that you do not want to slip and damage or run a drill bit against. So be very careful. But yes, also I think the PSA and the call to action specifically is maybe how to mitigate that a little bit.
Yeah. What do you suggest?
So what do I suggest? Well, it's nice of you to ask, Dave. What I like to do, what you'll notice. So if you take your thru-axle out, this isn't true of all of them, but most of them tend. That's not a proven fact. I'm guessing that most of them have like a captured washer on the side where the Allen headed, the tool would fit. It's not true of all of them. There's it's almost like a washer. Typically though, it's like a sticky fitment there, especially if it's been exposed to moisture and hasn't been serviced or anything. So I'll run, if I can either force some grease or some very thick, like heavy wet lube. I've been using Phil's Tenacious Lube. You know that product, Dave?
Yep,
Phil Wood. Yeah. It's an old school, very thick mineral oil based. It's like a classic fixture in old bike shops, but I don't use it for much, but I use it for this. And it's basically just to create like a lube barrier between that washer and the head of the axle itself, so that it has kind of like a grease layer that helps it from that binding up or galling that I was describing a moment ago. And it's something that has to be redone, I would say, fairly often. Every couple of times you take your axle out, you should definitely apply new grease, clean it because it gets gritty with like sand and little particles of dirt that can be.
Wash your washer.
What's that? Yeah, you got to wash your washer. Exactly. Wash it. So that's a call to action right there. And then, give it just a little dollop. You can sometimes work some grease in through like the kind of it's a captured washer, so you can't really like separate it. That's kind of the problem. Some of them you can, some don't have a washer at all. In which case you would just put like a healthy dollop of grease under the head so it doesn't get too sticky, I would say. Pay attention to the torque value. They all have them, but a lot of times people just kind of yeet on it with a wrench.
It's normally around 12. About 10. Yeah, 10 to 12. Yeah.
So, it's like a firm handshake, but you don't have to go to town on it because eventually you're just compressing your hub's axle end caps like harder than is needed. It can probably ultimately do some damage if you go overboard. Dave, you have a...
Yeah, the general tip with through axles is to do them up with the multi-tool you carry.
Yeah. So you can undo them with the multi-tool.
So then you can undo them with the multi-tool you're carrying.
Yes.
And then, so if you take your multi-tool out and torque that up, that'll give you a good feel for how tight you should be doing them, rather than, reefing on that long hex key you have in the garage.
Yes, it can be hard to exceed 10 or 12 Newton meters with a tiny, awkwardly shaped multi-tool in your hand. So for better or worse, your best bet is to not to over tighten them would be to use a tool that is somewhat hard to use. So Dave.
No, I was just gonna add that so I mean grease and cleanliness are the absolute two biggest factors, but also I guess knowing when to replace your through axle is probably also a useful thing, which is Brad, you mentioned it, like the through axles that are bolt up that require a 5mm hex key, which are increasingly common. They tend to wear the first, and then a lot of brands have now accepted that 6mm as a better interface because it can handle more torque. But if you're seeing that is hex end start to like mar out, start to round off, I would say now is the time to replace. And then also it is possible that the threads themselves will, get worn and damaged through, constant trying to force the thing through and align it with the dropout. So if those threads don't look super sharp and they're starting to look pretty dull and the thing's starting to get quite hard to put in place, then that's another sign that you're in need of a new through axle. And there's plenty of options these days, but typically the easiest option would, if you really don't know how to measure these things, probably the easiest option is to contact the manufacturer and ask them for the spec. And then with that spec, you can go shopping. There's specialist brands like Robert Through Axle or BergTech or others, or you can just get the same through axle that came with your bike.
And I should also, this is a gripe. I'll just preface. It's a gripe coming your way, Dave.
Good.
The industry has no
it's
standard.
Not about me.
It has no, it's not. But maybe you and I together can work to effect change. There is no standard for through axles.
There is not.
Thread pitch is different. Thread length is different.
Props to UDH for standardizing thread pitch.
Yes. So
but it hasn't standardized width.
No, and it hasn't. And to the extent that not all bikes, even new ones that are just coming out, still don't use the UDH. We haven't yet achieved standardization, which is, when has the industry ever really had standardization? Never.
Yeah.
So we're going to get through this. However, be aware of that. And when you're shopping for new through axles, as a result of our call to action this week, just be sure that you are aware of the specs that you need. And I would just also point out, Dave, that on many through axles, but not all of them, these specs can sometimes be found written or engraved on the through axle itself.
These days they are.
Yes. So it's I would say it's not quite a standardization of the spec of a through axle, but at least they're making it a little bit easier by providing the specs for the specific one on your bike by writing it on the through axle itself. So if you have questions, look there first.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the manufacturer, but there is a manufacturer that specializes in through axles, and they make most of the through axles on most of the bikes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to one of the managers at one of the trade shows, and this is quite a few years ago, so I assume the number's a lot worse. But from memory, I think he quoted that they have. This is to point out how right you are with your gripe. I think he pointed out they had 2,500 different sizes of through axles that they manufactured.
I was going to say wow at 25, and then you said 100.
So 2,500, 2,500 different axles. And how that comes about is there's 3 common thread pitches. There's other thread pitches as well that are less common. There's various different lengths front to rear, but every frame manufacturer seems to, vary the dropout width and therefore change the width. There's all the different hub length standards as well that you got to attend to. And then on top of that, there's also no real standardization to what the bolt head must look like. So, some are like a conical shape washer like Specialized, which neatly keys into the dropout and gives a flush fit.
Yeah, centers it in a way too.
Yeah. Others are flat. Others are more triangular. I know Trek is starting to move to its own conical kind of shape. So, anyway, there's zero standardization in this. So just know that even if you've like measured the length, chances are you're missing a few dimensions.
Yeah, 2,500. That might even be more than the number of derailleur hanger shapes out there, which is already was my number one biggest gripe until I found out there's 2,500 axle options. I know that's I assume that's front and rear options. So for sure, there's also like diameters, especially in the front side of life, where those are very different depending on type of bike. But nevertheless, that's crazy. I would also say Shimano with your brake pads too, your disc brake pads. Shimano got a lot of types out there, a lot of shapes.
There are. Yeah.
Meanwhile, they've used the same SBD cleat for like 40 years, but they have like 100 brake pad shapes. Oh God, gotta love it. Gotta love this stuff. Yeah. So, but anyway, that's our call to action. Take a look if you haven't. It's an often overlooked part of the bike, the thru-axle, a humble part. Doesn't do much, just holds one thing in place, but there's still something to think about.
That one thing happens to be your wheel.
Yeah, it's an important thing. Two important things. Yeah. Two of the most important things.
There's not a lot of redundancy on a bicycle. That's kind of the thing, like, people talk about certain parts being, safety critical and all that, but there really aren't that many parts that aren't. Like, even if you had a saddle brake, speaking from experience, you can get very injured from that.
Oh, yeah.
So, everything on a bicycle needs to be there. It's, there's no, there's a cup holder, but Anyway, so there's plenty to talk about for future PSAs, but that's the one for this week.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I've got two quick little tech bites to cover. The first being Ritchey Montebello, which is a new randonneur style bike from Ritchey. Steel bike, like pretty much everything else they do, triple butted custom tubes with a 1 1/8 straight steerer fork. This one intrigues me because it's kind of looks a bit like from a distance like their Road Logic disc, which is a classic of a road bike. But this one being randonneur style, they've greatly increased the stack height, they've lowered the bottom bracket, and they've lengthened the wheelbase. It can fit up to 40mm tires without fenders, or I think the max is 36mm with fenders. But yeah, I think it is obviously aimed at those that ride all day or for multiple days. But I think it also could be a really good road bike or all-road style bike for people that are looking for a bit more of a relaxed geometry, that need a taller stack than what a lot of mainstream options offer. So yeah, that one stood out to me as a cool bike, and it's a good brand. They always offer frames at pretty reasonable prices, and they do ride nicely. So the other thing to mention, shout out to Shimano. They have announced that they are donating $10 million USD over the next 10 years to support and facilitate trail projects and trail advocacy organizations. So giving back, I guess, and helping build the trails that we then will hopefully use Shimano and SRAM components on. So I guess, I'm bringing this up because I think it's important that brands do this, that they give back to the community that they are a part of, and that they hopefully profit from. So they're not, Shimano is obviously not the first to do this. SRAM have various organizations, they're linked to World Bicycle Relief, but they also do advocacy in terms of trying to get cycle networks going. Trek also have similar advocacy going. Santa Cruz has done a trail fund before where it gave back, but certainly, it's not super widespread that you hear of brands giving back and helping develop trails. So I guess, my call to action is more please.
When you think about it, that's a pretty good idea to make places more accessible to use the things that you make in the first place. Yeah. Good idea. You're growing
your market, basically.
Yes.
So like it's not necessarily, it's a marketing initiative in that you're growing your potential customer base by providing places to ride. So it's a feel-good thing to do, but it's kind of also just the right thing to do for brands if they truly care about the sustainability of their product and of their business.
And let's be honest too, there must be some tax incentive for them to donate such a hefty sum.
Sure.
And so why, if you got to donate anyway to get that tax break, you might as well do it in a way that kind of pays you back a little bit. So hey, even if it's for not exactly the most upstanding of reasons, it's still a good thing to do. And it's cool. Like you said, I was affiliated with SRAM and earlier than that Specialized, and they were always investing and donating to World Bicycle Relief. And there's another charity called Songo that Specialized specifically is affiliated with for the Cape Epic race in South Africa. It's a mountain bike stage race, a very big one. And there's like a lot of sort of charitable outreach associated. Even the factory team races under a different team name for that to bring awareness to that. So it's cool to see these brands.
What does Songo do? That they're about giving poor communities access to bikes and to find
exactly
recycling, right?
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure there's more nuance to it than that. And there's many educational and like sort of giving some kids who live in at-risk places a place to go and like facilities to use to, both just like to do normal kid stuff, homework and play, but also learn specifically about bikes and even sometimes bike maintenance. And so that's an organization that is specifically in South Africa that Specialized has a strong presence in South Africa, and the race team is somewhat headquartered there. The mountain bike team is, and triathlon too, to some degree, and that might be less now than it was when I was there, but still a strong presence in a lot of the staff who are employed by the racing department.
The official capital of the Specialized Epic.
Exactly, and so it's all in Stellenbosch, which is like a nice little enclave there, kind of outside of Cape Town, and that's where Songo kind of focuses its efforts. And Specialized in SRAM, of course, also affiliated with World Bicycle Relief, which we talked about with that Gazelle bike a couple episodes ago.
Buffalo.
The Buffalo bike. Let me say Gazelle. What is Gazelle? That is a bike brand.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those, one of the big five anyway. Yeah. Buffalo is the bike with the two chains and two independent cogs and like driving. Yeah, so that was the bike we talked about, I don't know, month and a half ago, maybe, Dave. That's an effort that World Bicycle Relief is sort of pioneering to bring bikes for purpose to communities that may not have access.
Brad, would you listen to an hour-long deep dive with the key people behind World Bicycle Relief about the development of that bike?
Yeah.
All right. I think I might do one.
To get the parts for I want to build up my own like townie with that stuff on it. Okay. It's so cool. I'm serious. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like cheap stuff, no doubt, but it's nevertheless a pretty compelling and interesting and quirky piece of tech that is not like anything else that I've really seen.
Well, it's the plans for that podcast are in progress. So stay tuned, everyone.
So that was a leading question you were asking there. Good thing I said yes.
It was. Yeah, that would have been awkward.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that feels like a happy place to end up. And Brad, as always, great catching up.
It was a pleasure. I look forward to reading your deep dive into all things all road.
Yes. Make sure you get yourself a drink, sit down, make yourself comfy. They're long reads, but there's, as we covered, there's a lot of new tech to take in, and I believe that these groups do represent some pretty big shifts in where trends are going to go and what the future of road and gravel groups are going to look like in 3 to 5 years from now. So, and how it'll also change bike design. So yeah, plenty to take in.
I would also say, will we see an Explore group used on a mountain bike in the next 365 days? No. Dave says no.
I don't think so. So I think there's the Explore range makes a lot of sense for mountain bikers, but SRAM say no to that. They say don't do it because the derailleur is designed around a more road style chainline, and the derailleur itself hasn't got the adjustment in it to adapt to suspension linkage requirements. So you can't adjust there's no flip chip.
So what you're saying is on my hardtail, it's totally cool.
On your hardtail, especially if it's of an older wheel standard, you're totally fine. Yeah.
I just need a 142 bike with a UDH hanger on a hardtail mountain bike. Let me just get back to you on that.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Right.
But the range is compelling. We always wanted that range, and we never got it with the mountain bike stuff. So maybe one day, we'll see.
That's a niche request for mountain bike to have that range, but sorry, Nino.
Yeah, leave it to some World Cup guys to make some niche requests. But anyway, here we go. Yep.
Amazing.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, bro.
It was a pleasure to be with you.
All right. Well, that concludes this week's episode of Geek Warning. If you haven't already, please consider becoming a member. It's your membership that makes this podcast and everything else we do at Escape Collective possible. So yeah, please head to escapecollective.com/join. Consider becoming part of the community, and yeah, you'll, as a result, be able to fully enjoy our ad-free website that doesn't have pop-ups every second or annoying unrelated ads throughout the content. You just get clean content and hopefully an enjoyable few podcasts in return. Thank you. Till next week. Bye.